I was uninvited from a family trip by my own daughter-in-law. She said it was family only. What she did not say, what she clearly forgot, was that the destination she was talking about was my private property. The message came through on a quiet afternoon. Written carefully, almost politely, she thanked me for letting them use the house again. She said everyone was excited. Then, in the same breath, she explained that this particular trip would be better without me. Too many people, she wrote. Too many opinions. They wanted it simple, just family. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. There was no anger in her words. No apology either. The tone suggested the decision had already been made and merely required my understanding. I noticed she never used my name. My name is Maribel Hayes. I am 52. I have been a mother for a long time, and a mother-in-law long enough to know when I am being managed instead of included. Still, I read the message again, slower this time. Searching for a place where I might fit, there wasn't one. What unsettled me most was how easily she spoke about the house, as if it were a shared resource instead of something I owned outright. As if access was automatic. As if my presence was optional, but my generosity was not. I did not respond right away. I set the phone down and waited for the familiar instinct to smooth things over to rise in me. It always did. That afternoon, it took longer than usual. Later that evening, my son called. He said she had mentioned the trip. He spoke carefully, like someone walking around a fragile object, and I realized we were not having the same conversation. That was when I understood this was no longer just a misunderstanding. We talked 2 days later, sitting across from each other at my kitchen table. She didn't ask how I was. She folded her hands and got straight to the point. "We've been talking." My daughter-in-law said, "About the trip." I nodded. "I assumed so." She glanced toward my son, then back at me. "We think it would be better if you didn't come." The words landed cleanly, almost rehearsed. "Better for who?" I asked. "For everyone," she said quickly. "It's not personal. We just want this to be about family bonding." I waited. My son stared at the edge of the table, rubbing his thumb against the wood like he might sand it smooth if he tried hard enough. "I am family," I said. She smiled, tight and practiced. "You know what I mean." "I don't." I said, "Say it clearly." She exhaled. "This trip is for us. For the kids. For a real family dynamic. Too many voices make things complicated." I turned to my son. "Is that how you see it?" He shifted in his chair. "Mom, nobody's trying to hurt you." "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice stayed low. "It's just easier this way." Easier. The word sat there between us. "So I'm inconvenient," I said. "No," she replied. "You're just not necessary for this part." I felt something tighten in my chest, but my voice stayed steady. "You're still planning to stay at the house?" "Yes," she said, relieved. "Of course, that part's already arranged. Without me," I said. She nodded. "We thought you'd understand." My son finally looked up. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I leaned back in my chair. In that moment, I saw how neatly the decision had been wrapped. No raised voices, no apologies, just a quiet agreement that I was no longer included, only useful. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. No one tried to stop me. My son didn't call the next day, or the day after that. When he finally did, it was to ask if I still had the extra set of keys for the house. "I think so," I said. "Why, we're making a list," he replied. "Just trying to stay organized." There it was again. Careful, neutral, as if nothing had happened. "You didn't say anything," I told him. There was a pause. "About what?" "About her telling me not to come." He sighed softly. "Mom, We already talked about that. No, I said. She talked. You stayed quiet. That's not fair. It is. I said. You let her speak for both of you. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than an argument would have. I didn't want it to turn into a fight. He said, you know how things get. I do. I said, they get quiet. I get smaller. He didn't respond. I could almost see him nodding, the way he always did when he wanted a conversation to end without resolving anything. After we hung up, I sat there longer than I meant to, thinking about how often this pattern had repeated itself. Holidays adjusted for convenience. Decisions made without me, then explained after the fact. My opinions thanked for, then ignored. I had told myself this was what love looked like, giving space, letting things slide, being the reasonable one. When his wife wanted control over the guest list, I stepped back. When she rearranged traditions, I adapted. When my role shifted from parent to background presence, I convinced myself it was natural. But silence has a shape. It presses in slowly. It teaches you where you are no longer expected to stand. That evening, my son sent another message. He said they were excited about the trip and hoped I was doing okay. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood what his silence had been telling me all along. The house by the water was never meant to be a bargaining chip. It was something my husband and I chose together, long before there were spouses and grandchildren and quiet negotiations. We should buy it now, he told me the first time we walked through. If we wait, we'll talk ourselves out of it. It's more than we planned, I said. He smiled. We've handled more than we planned. We bought it with savings and a loan we paid down slowly. Every improvement came in stages, one room at a time, one summer at a time. When he died, people assumed I would sell it. Even my sister asked, gently, do you really want to keep all that responsibility? I already know how. I said, keeping the house wasn't sentimental stubbornness, it was practical. The mortgage was gone. The upkeep was manageable. It was mine, cleanly and legally, with no shared claims. I handled the taxes, the repairs, the quiet decisions that come with ownership. After my son married, I offered it without hesitation. Use it. I told them. Take the kids. Make memories. My daughter-in-law thanked me the way people do when they assume the offer will always stand. Over time, her requests grew more specific. We'll need the bigger bedroom, she said once. The kids sleep better that way. Another time, can you move the old chairs? They don't really fit our style. I adjusted. I stored things. I stayed flexible. Mom, it's just easier if you let her handle it. My son said when I mentioned feeling edged out. I am letting her handle it, I replied. I'm just asking to be included. You are, he said, quickly. You know that. I wanted to believe him. What the house represented to me wasn't nostalgia, it was continuity, proof that something I built had lasted. I had shared it freely because generosity felt natural, and because I believed family worked on trust. But ownership doesn't disappear just because you stop naming it out loud. I never handed over the deed. I never gave up the keys. I simply assumed that respect would keep pace with access. By the time I realized it hadn't, the house had already become something else to them. A destination, a convenience, a place they felt entitled to, whether I was welcome there or not. I went to the house the following weekend, not because anyone asked me to, but because I always did. I unlocked the door, walked through each room, and made a quiet list in my head of what needed attention. My phone buzzed while I was checking the pantry. My daughter-in-law texted, "Can you make sure there are enough towels and the kids need snacks they like?" I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, "I'll take care of it." Another message followed almost immediately. "Also, we'll probably arrive late Friday. Could you leave the lights on?" I didn't answer right away. I folded the extra towels anyway. I added snacks to the grocery list. I replaced a loose hinge on the cabinet door because it would bother her if it squeaked. Later that afternoon, my son called. She just wants things to go smoothly, he said. I know, I replied. They always do when I'm the one smoothing them. He hesitated. You don't have to do all this. But you expect me to. I said, that's the difference. He didn't argue. He thanked me instead, like gratitude could replace consideration. The next day, another message came through. We're thinking of moving the old dresser out of the guest room. It's bulky. I typed. Where would you like it stored? Then deleted it. I typed it again and sent it. The requests kept coming. Bedding preferences, grocery suggestions, a reminder to check the heating system, just in case. Not once did anyone ask how I felt. Not once did they acknowledge that I wasn't coming. By the time I finished, the house was ready. Clean, stocked, quiet. I locked the door and stood there longer than necessary, holding the keys in my hand. I realized then that my generosity had started to look like consent. And the more I gave without being present, the easier it became for them to forget that I was more than a caretaker. That night, I drove home and waited for the familiar urge to apologize for feeling hurt. It didn't come. The message came late in the evening, long after I had stopped expecting anything thoughtful. My daughter-in-law wrote, We figured out the rooms. The kids will take the bunk room. We'll use the main bedroom. My sister might come for a night, so we'll put her in the small room. I read it once. Then again, there was no mention of me. Not as a guest, not as an option. I wasn't included even hypothetically, I replied. You've planned everything already, she answered almost immediately. It just made sense to get it organized early. I sat with that for a moment before typing back. And where did you think I would stay? The pause this time was longer. Oh, she wrote, I assumed you wouldn't be there. We already talked about that. Assumed? As if my absence were a fixed detail, like the weather. My son called a few minutes later. She didn't mean anything by it. He said quickly, She's just trying to be efficient. Efficient at erasing me, I said. That's not fair, he replied. You know she appreciates you. If she appreciated me, I said, she would remember I exist. He lowered his voice. Mom, you're taking this too personally. I'm finally taking it personally enough. I said, there's a difference. He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing, waiting for me to soften, to back down the way I always had. She's under a lot of stress, he added. Can you just let it go? I closed my eyes. For years, letting things go had been my role. Letting comments slide, letting decisions pass without my input, letting myself become flexible enough to disappear. I have been letting it go, I said, every time. Another silence settled between us. This one felt final. After we hung up, I looked at the message again, the certainty in her words, the comfort she had in making plans around me, not with me. Something shifted then. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. I wasn't being excluded because of a misunderstanding. I was being excluded because they believed they could, and for the first time, I stopped wondering how to earn my place. I started thinking about what I had already given away without being asked. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was upset, but because my mind kept circling the same quiet truth. By morning, I stopped pacing around it and opened the drawer where I kept important papers. The deed was there, exactly where it had always been. I laid it out on the table and read it slowly, line by line. Even though I already knew what it said, my name was the only one on it. No conditions, no shared ownership, no fine print that tied it to anyone else's goodwill. Later that day, my son called again. Mom, he said, careful as ever, we're just trying to make this trip work. I know. I replied, so am I. He hesitated. We don't want this to turn into a bigger issue. It already is. I said, You just haven't been calling it one. He sighed. You're not seriously thinking about pulling the house. Are you? I looked at the deed again. I'm thinking about the fact that no one asked me before deciding I wouldn't be there. That's different. He said, This is about family time, and the house is about ownership. I replied, Those are two separate things. He was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. You wouldn't really stop us. I didn't answer right away. I folded the papers neatly and put them back in the drawer. I haven't decided anything. I said, I'm just finally looking at what's mine. That unsettled him more than anger ever could have. You're overthinking this. No, I said. I've been underthinking it for years. After we hung up, I sat there with my hands resting on the table. The power wasn't new. It had always been there. What was new was my willingness to acknowledge it. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I wasn't looking to punish anyone. I was simply done pretending that my generosity meant surrender. By the end of the afternoon, I made one clear decision. Whatever happened next would be intentional, not automatic. I drove up early the morning before they were scheduled to arrive. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't ask permission. I unlocked the door the same way I always had, with the old key that still fit because nothing had changed yet. The locksmith arrived an hour later. He was middle-aged, polite, and didn't ask questions beyond what he needed. You want everything replaced, he asked, looking at the front door. Yes, I said. All exterior locks. He nodded. Same keys for everything. No, I said. New ones. He paused for half a second, then smiled lightly. Happens more than you'd think. While he worked, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from my daughter-in-law. We're finalizing our arrival time. I didn't answer. The locksmith tested each door carefully. Try it, he said, handing me the new key. I turned it. It caught clean. Unfamiliar. Final. These are the only copies. He said, You want spares made? No. I replied. This is enough. He packed up his tools and wrote up the invoice. I paid him and thanked him. At the door, he hesitated. Everything okay? He asked. It will be, I said. After he left, I stood alone in the entryway. The house felt the same, but something in me didn't. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I was calm in a way I hadn't been for a long time. My son called while I was putting the keys in my bag. Hey, he said, We're all set for tomorrow. I know, I replied. There was a pause. You sound distant. I'm focused. I said, Mom. He lowered his voice. You're not upset, are you? I'm done being overlooked. I said, That's not the same thing. He started to say something else, then stopped. We'll talk when we get there. Yes, I said. We will. I hung up and locked the door from the inside, just to hear the sound. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It simply clicked into place. I took one last look around, not to remember anything, but to confirm something I already knew. I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting out of clarity. They arrived just after noon. I heard the cars before I saw them, doors closing, voices overlapping in the way people sound when they expect to be welcomed. My daughter-in-law walked up first. She didn't hesitate. She took the old key from her bag and slid it into the lock. Nothing happened. She tried again, harder this time. Then she frowned and stepped back. Did you lock it differently? She called. My son took the key from her and tried himself. He jiggled it, leaned his shoulder into the door, then pulled back. That's weird. He said, Mom. I opened the door just enough to see them, the chain still in place. Yes, I said. What did you do? My daughter-in-law asked. Her voice was already sharp. I changed the locks. I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. Why would you do that? Because this is my house. She laughed once. short and disbelieving. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. My son stepped forward. "Mom, we drove all this way. The kids are exhausted." "I know," I said. "You planned that. This is ridiculous." She said, "We already told everyone we'd be staying here, Yoao." "You told me I wasn't welcome," I replied. "You were very clear. That's not what I meant." She said quickly, "Don't twist it. I'm not." I said, "I listened." My son rubbed his face. "Mom, please, let's just talk inside." "There is no inside for you," I said. She crossed her arms. "You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm setting a boundary. You don't get to do this." She said, "Family doesn't lock each other out. You told me this trip was family only." I said, "I respected that." Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said, "it's consistent." My son looked between us. "Mom, say something. Anything." I met his eyes. "You already did. You just didn't use words." She stepped closer to the door. "Open it." I shook my head. "I won't lend my home to people who decided I don't belong." For a moment, no one spoke. Then she started talking all at once, accusing, insisting, demanding. One of the kids asked why we weren't going inside. My son said my name again. Softer this time. I reached up and slid the chain back into place. "I hope you find somewhere else to stay," I said. "I truly do." Then I closed the door and turned the lock. They left that afternoon. I didn't watch from the window. I didn't need to. The silence that followed told me enough. My son called that night. "She's furious," he said. "The kids don't understand." "I know," I replied. "They weren't meant to." He hesitated. "You could have handled it differently." "So could you," I said. He went quiet. Then, softer, "I didn't think you'd really do it." "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought I would." We didn't argue. We didn't resolve anything either. We agreed to take space. That word used to scare me. Now it felt honest. A few days later, I met with a local agent and asked about renting the house seasonally. Practical use. Clear terms, no assumptions. When my son heard, he sounded surprised again. "You're serious about this," he said. "Yes." I told him, "I am." The distance settled into something steady, not warm, not cruel, just real. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I stopped rehearsing explanations no one asked for. What I kept wasn't the house. I already had that. What I kept was my right to decide who had access to me and under what conditions. I kept my voice by using it once, clearly, instead of losing it slowly. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like or subscribe. And if you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, leave a comment. You're not alone in that choice. Here's what this taught me. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're clarity. They show people where you stand when words have failed. Peace doesn't come from being included at any cost. It comes from knowing what you will no longer trade for belonging. I locked the door that night without hesitation, not to keep anyone out, but to finally keep myself intact.